The letter Aleph is the first of the Hebrew letters. As you can see, it is constructed from a yud above, a yud below, and a slanted vav simultaneously connecting and separating it. We're told that Aleph, as the first letter, is a very godly letter. That is why, of all the names of God, more names begin with the letter Aleph than any other letter. Interestingly enough, the name for a human being, Adam, also begins with an Aleph. Therefore, we're told in Kabbalah and Hasidut that the letter Aleph stands for the paradox of God and man. In this picture of the Aleph, God represents the upper Yud, man represents the lower Yud, and the slanting Vav represents the Torah that is connecting us together. The idea of paradox runs throughout the Aleph. And one way we can see this is not only in the physical form of the Aleph, but also in the fact that the number of Aleph equals 1, yet the meaning of the word is Aleph, 1,000. So here we have what's called the paradox of unity within plurality. The level of the worlds, one represents the beginning of all process, what we will call cause and effect. Everything starts from one. An important example of this is what's called the binary system on which all computers are based. All computers are based on a practically endless series of zeros and ones. Even though the computer seems very complicated, it actually is based on a process of 0 and 1. So 1 represents the beginning of all earthly action, all cause and effect. On the level of souls, 1 represents the oneness of the Jewish people. We are told that even though we all have individual souls, and these souls are connected to larger and larger soul roots, ultimately, all Jewish souls are conceived of as one big unified soul. In the davening of Shabbat, at Mincha time, we say, Ata echad, v'shimcha echad, u'mi ka'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. You are one, and your name is one, and who is like the people of Israel, one nation in the earth? That the power of the Jewish people comes from the unification of all the individual souls when they come together to form the great soul of all of Israel. And on the level of divinity, number 1 equals the idea of God being one, and not just God being one, but everything that He has created being one. The cardinal statement of faith in Judaism is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God our God, God is one. And we're taught the oneness of God is not the oneness of a number. Because the oneness of God is unique. It's not just 1, 2, 3, but the unity of God pervades everything. So the basic meaning of the Aleph is the infinite God relating to a finite world, and especially man, and searching for the oneness within plurality. Mem is one of the 5 letters that has 2 forms. A form that comes in the beginning or middle of the word, and a final form when the letter appears as the last letter of a word. The 2 shapes of the mem relate to water. The word for water in Hebrew, mayim, begins with one mem and ends with the final mem, with a yud in between. The normative mem represents a body of water. It's like a square, but there's an opening at the left. So these are running bodies of waters, springs, rivers, streams. The final mem is a closed body of water. An ocean, a lake, a pond. And we can see in the word mayim itself, it's very beautiful, that it's made up of the 2 forms of the letter mem, and a yud, which is like a drop, the individual drops of water in the body of water. We all know that life is impossible without water. Water gives life. We can go weeks, maybe months without eating, but we can't go without drinking. And we also know that anywhere from 70-80% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, and the human body is made up of water. So all of these connotations connect water to life. In the Talmud, there's an expression, ein mayim ela Torah. There's no water other than Torah. And what they meant to say was that every mention of water in the Torah is an allusion to Torah itself. Just like water gives life, Torah gives life. There is a verse that says, Nachal novea mekor chachma, a stream that is flowing from the source of wisdom. And we're told that, Kabbalistically, that the Torah comes out of the place called wisdom, chachma. It flows out like a river. So the letter mem appears in the word chachma because it is connected to life and to wisdom. The mem is the 13th letter of the Hebrew letters. 13 spells the word ahava, love. And this is connected to how many poets relate to love as flowing like water. There's an aspect of water that reminds us of love. 13 is an important number because it's the number of what are called the 13 midot of rachamim. The 13 midot of rachamim, the 13 aspects of compassion. Compassion, of course, is connected to love. So the letter mem is connected to all these ideas: life, love, wisdom, and Torah. And this is manifest very much in the number of mem, which is 40, because Moshe spent 40 days on Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. This is not a coincidence. The number 40 represents Torah itself. And because of the shape of the mem, and being a square, as we've learned many times in the discussion of the letters are archetypal forms. So the letter mem represents the square, which is also a type of cycle, a self-contained cycle. So therefore we have many, many different cycles in the Torah that have to do with 40. We mentioned one already, that Moshe spent 40 days on Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. In actuality, he spent 3 periods of 40 days, because after the sin of the golden calf, he spent another 40 days asking for forgiveness for the Jewish people, and a third 40 days where he received the second tablets of the law. We spent 40 years in the desert. There were 40 days of rain that came at the time of Noah, when the world was renewed again. And a very, very important connection is that we talk about the 9 months of pregnancy, but it's really 9 full months, which are 40 weeks. The Talmud talks about 40 weeks of pregnancy. And what is the environment that the fetus is in the womb? Water. So in all of these connections, we see that the mem is a letter of life, a letter of birth and of cycle, of connecting to wisdom. So an appropriate meditation would be to envision a body of water, whether a stream or a river or a spring, and to, in a sense, feel it encompassing one's body and one's soul, and how that can connect us to the wisdom of the Torah and the wisdom of God. The last letter of the Hebrew letters is a Tav. And fittingly, it is described as the shape of a seal or a stamp, as would be befitting the last letter of the Hebrew letters. And also its meaning is a code or a note, a stamp or an impression. The sages tell us that God's stamp is emet, truth. The Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet. The mem is called the middle, and the tav is the last letter. In other words, God's seal is His truth and His providence and His presence in every point of reality. The last letter of the first word of the Torah is a Tav, Bereshit. And the first 3 words, their last letters spell out emet, truth. So we see at the very beginning of creation is God's impression of truth. And when we get to the 7th day of creation, Shabbat, the last 3 words, Bara Elokim la'asot, that God made to do, spell out emet. So from the beginning of creation is God's stamp of emet, ending with the letter Tav, and the end of the creation itself of Shabbat ends la'asot, to do. In other letters, we have learned over and over again about the importance of rectification as a task of a Jew in this world. And here we see that the Tav represents God's point of truth and the impression left on the soul as it comes into the body in order to reveal God's truth in the world. The letter Tav is actually made up of 2 letters, a Daled and a Nun. These letters spell out Dan, one of the 12 tribes. Interestingly enough, Dan was the last of the tribes to march in the desert, and his task was to pick up lost articles. Just like the letter Tav is the last letter of the alphabet, Dan, the two letters that make up the Tav, they were the last to march, and they were cleaning up things that everyone had left behind. And on the level of divinity, we see God's impression, as it were, God's fingerprints or fossils in every point of reality. Dan also spells out judgment. And judgment also exists on every level of reality. This world is full of judgments. When we leave this world, we're told that every soul is judged. And on the level of divinity, we're told that the two forces that permeate all reality, represented by God's four-letter name and by the name Elohim, is chesed and gevura, loving kindness and judgment, strength. The letter Tav equals 400. Relate to Abraham buying the burial place for Sarah for 400 pieces of silver. This is a very symbolic purchase, because with the purchase of this burial place for Sarah, in a sense, Abraham is taking possession of all of the land of Israel, which is described by our sages as being 400 parsang by 400 parsang. The letter Tav can be meditated upon as being the end, how every ending leads to a new beginning, how every cycle will repeat itself, and how God's impression and truth is stamped in every point of reality, including our minds, our souls, and our heart.